What if one battle determined the fate of two entire civilizations, shifting the course of history forever? A battle where empires clashed, cultures collided, and the future of Europe and the Ottoman Empire hung in the balance. The Battle of Lepanto, October 7, 1571. A day that would echo through the centuries. But what led to this monumental confrontation?
What were the stakes?
And how did a single day change everything? Imagine a fleet, vast and unyielding, poised for battle on the shimmering waters of the Ionian Sea. On one side, the Ottoman Empire, stretching across continents, its fleet brimming with power and ambition. On the other, a coalition of European states, Catholic powers united in fear of the Ottomans' relentless expansion. Each side believed this was their moment of destiny.
But who would emerge victorious?
And what would it mean for the world? For decades, the Ottomans had been pushing deeper into European territory, threatening the heart of Christendom. Now the Holy League, a rare alliance between Catholic Spain, the Papal States, Venice and others, had mustered an armada to stand against them. But their forces were fragmented, their strategy uncertain. Would they unite in time to face the might of the Ottomans? Or would they falter, leaving Europe vulnerable to Ottoman domination? As the battle unfolded, history was written in blood, strategy, and sheer willpower. But there was more to the story than the clash of swords and cannons. What motivated the men who sailed into battle? And how did this one day shape the fate of Europe, the Mediterranean, and even the future of Western civilization? Number 1. The rise of the Ottoman Empire. What made the Ottoman Empire so powerful? Was it their military might, their political cunning, or something deeper, their ability to adapt and conquer? The Ottoman Empire's rise was nothing short of extraordinary. From their humble beginnings in Anatolia in the late 13th century, the Ottomans had grown into a global superpower by the mid-16th century. But it wasn't just their military superiority that made them feared, it was their understanding of the world, their use of diplomacy, and their sheer adaptability in a rapidly changing geopolitical landscape. At its height, the empire stretched from the gates of Vienna in the west to the shores of Persia in the east. Its navy was unmatched in the Mediterranean, and its armies were renowned for their discipline and tactics. But beneath the surface, the Ottomans faced many challenges: internal strife, religious tensions, and the ever-present threat of rival empires. What truly set the Ottomans apart, however, was their ability to combine the best elements of different cultures. The fusion of Turkish, Persian, and Arab influences created a unique identity, one that respected tradition but wasn't afraid to innovate. This was true not just in their military, but in their politics and administration. The Ottoman system was efficient, pragmatic, and flexible, qualities that allowed them to maintain their power for centuries. But by the mid-1500s, the Ottomans had grown ambitious. They set their sights on the Mediterranean, an area rich in trade, power, and culture. The Ottomans had already begun pushing westward, gaining control of key ports and territories along the coast. To the European powers, this expansion was not just a threat, it was an existential crisis. As the Ottomans pushed deeper into the Mediterranean, the European powers, already fractured by religious divisions, began to take notice. This was no longer just about trade or territory, it was about survival. And as the Ottomans advanced, they weren't just fighting for land, they were fighting for the soul of Europe itself. Number 2. The formation of the Holy League. What drove the Catholic powers of Europe to form the Holy League? Was it fear, desperation, or a shared belief that this was their last chance to stop the Ottoman threat? By the mid-1500s, the European powers were divided. The Catholic states were embroiled in religious wars with Protestant reformers, while the Protestant nations themselves had no desire to ally with their Catholic counterparts. Yet, as the Ottoman threat loomed larger, something extraordinary happened. Pope Pius V, recognizing the peril of a divided Europe, called for a united front against the Ottomans. The result was the Holy League, an unprecedented coalition of Catholic states that set aside their differences for a common cause. At the heart of this alliance was the Kingdom of Spain, led by King Philip II, a devout Catholic and one of the most powerful rulers of the time. Alongside Spain were the Papal States, Venice, and smaller Italian states, all recognizing that the Ottoman Empire's expansion would spell disaster for Christendom. The Holy League was more than just a military alliance, it was a symbol of Europe's unity in the face of an existential threat. But the formation of the Holy League was not without its challenges. There were political maneuverings, diplomatic negotiations, and the ever-present question of how to unite forces that had long been rivals. Yet, despite these difficulties, the Holy League managed to assemble a formidable fleet. But would it be enough to take on the Ottoman juggernaut? The Holy League's forces were a mixture of naval power and military might. Spain provided the bulk of the fleet, Venice supplied crucial ships and expertise, and the Papal States offered both spiritual and military support. But the most difficult task was yet to come. Would these forces be able to work together effectively? Could this disparate alliance, made up of different cultures, agendas and political goals, truly unite to face the Ottomans in battle? Number 3. The Ottoman fleet assembles. How did the Ottomans prepare for battle? Was it just sheer numbers, or was there a strategy at play that the Europeans failed to understand? As the Holy League assembled its forces, the Ottoman Empire was already preparing for a clash. Led by the Sultan Selim II, the Ottomans gathered one of the most formidable naval fleets the world had ever seen. It was said to be over 250 ships strong, commanded by one of the most skilled admirals in the Ottoman fleet, Ali Pasha. But the Ottoman fleet was more than just a collection of ships. It was a symbol of the empire's strength, ambition and desire for domination. The Ottoman navy had been a formidable force for decades, but this was different. The Ottomans were not merely sending their ships to secure territory, they were preparing for a showdown with the very heart of Europe. Their strategy was clear: crush the Holy League before they could assemble enough strength to pose a real threat. The Ottoman navy was not just large, it was highly organized, equipped with the latest weapons, and well-trained in naval warfare.
But there was a problem.
The Ottoman fleet was vast, but it was also spread out across the Mediterranean. Their ships, while powerful, lacked the unity that the Holy League was beginning to achieve. Could the Ottomans unite their forces in time to face the coalition head-on? Would their superior numbers and naval experience be enough to overcome the Holy League's unity and resolve? As the days passed, both sides knew that time was running out. The Ottomans were determined to crush the Holy League before it could gain momentum, but the Holy League was equally determined to strike first, before the Ottomans could bring their full power to bear. What would happen when these two forces met on the open sea? The answer would come on October 7, 1571. But would it be the victory the Ottomans expected, or would it be the Holy League's finest hour? Number 4. The battle begins, tensions in the air. What was it like in the moments before the battle? Could the men feel the weight of history bearing down on them? As the fleets of the Holy League and the Ottoman Empire neared each other, the tension in the air was palpable. Both sides were aware of the stakes. This battle would not only determine the fate of the Mediterranean, but also the very future of Europe. The Holy League ships, though united in their purpose, were still a diverse array of forces, each with its own agenda and internal conflicts. The Ottoman fleet, on the other hand, was a massive coordinated war machine, its soldiers, sailors and gunners seasoned by years of successful conquest. The two forces, poised on either side of the sea, could almost feel the impending clash. As the battle began, the sheer scale of the conflict became evident. The Holy League, led by the experienced Venetian commander, Don Juan of Austria, was determined to face the Ottomans head-on. The sound of cannon fire echoed across the sea, a thunderous herald of the conflict to come. The wind pushed the ships together, and soon, the water was filled with the crash of heavy artillery, the roar of soldiers charging, and the desperate cries of men fighting for their lives. But it wasn't just the naval power that was on display, it was the clash of cultures, the ideals of Christianity pitted against the ever-expanding reach of the Ottoman Empire. Each side fought not just for survival, but for the very future of their way of life. The fate of nations, the balance of power in the Mediterranean, and the very heart of Europe were all at stake. With every cannonball that flew, with every wave that crashed against the ships, the tension escalated. The outcome of the battle seemed uncertain, but the stakes could not have been higher. Who would claim victory? Would the Holy League's united forces overcome the Ottomans' military dominance? Or would the Ottoman fleet once again show its overwhelming might? The clash of steel, the burn of gunpowder, and the cries of the wounded filled the air, as the two great powers collided in one of the most important naval battles in history. Number 5. The turning point, a tactical genius emerges. What was the moment that changed the course of the battle? Was it sheer luck or a stroke of genius? In the chaos of the battle, it was clear that neither side had an easy advantage. The Ottoman fleet, with its overwhelming numbers and strength, seemed to have the upper hand at first. However, as the day wore on, the Holy League's forces began to show remarkable resilience, especially in the face of some very difficult odds.
What turned the tide?
The answer lay in the tactics employed by Don Juan of Austria. While the Holy League had struggled to unite their forces in the lead-up to the battle, once the fighting began, Don Juan proved to be a master of naval warfare. His decision to divide the fleet into smaller, more manageable units, each with its own specialized task, allowed for better coordination and flexibility on the battlefield. This tactical flexibility, along with a keen understanding of naval maneuvering, allowed the Holy League to exploit weaknesses in the Ottoman line. But it wasn't just strategy that won the day, it was the bravery and determination of the men fighting. From the cannon crews to the soldiers on the front lines, the Christian forces were determined not to let the Ottomans take the Mediterranean without a fight. Even as their ships took heavy damage, the resolve of the Holy League's men grew stronger. Meanwhile, the Ottomans, overconfident in their initial success, began to falter. They were not prepared for the level of resistance they encountered. The tide was beginning to turn, and with it, the course of the battle and history. Number 6. The Ottoman collapse, a fleet in disarray. How did the once feared Ottoman fleet fall apart so quickly? What caused the rapid disintegration of their forces? The Ottoman Empire, known for its highly disciplined military, was now facing a breakdown in its naval superiority. As the battle wore on, the Ottomans began to lose their cohesion. The Holy League's unexpected resistance, combined with their strategic brilliance, began to exploit cracks in the Ottoman line. One of the key factors that led to the Ottoman collapse was the fall of their commander, Ali Pasha, who was killed during the battle. With their leader gone, the Ottoman fleet lost its central command and coordination, throwing their forces into chaos. The situation only worsened as the Ottoman ships were overwhelmed by the sheer number and tenacity of the Holy League's forces. The battle had become a bloodbath, with men fighting for survival, each side desperately trying to keep their fleet intact. Yet, despite their size and initial advantage, the Ottomans began to break under the pressure. Their ships, once formidable, were now vulnerable targets. The once unshakable empire was crumbling before the eyes of its enemies. The disarray of the Ottoman forces created a ripple effect across the battlefield. With their fleet in disarray, the Ottomans began to retreat. Their once great naval superiority was shattered in the span of a few short hours, and the Holy League pressed forward, eager to press their advantage. As the Ottoman forces retreated, the realization began to set in: the battle was slipping from their grasp. It was a devastating defeat, one that would send shockwaves through the Ottoman Empire and change the course of history in the Mediterranean. But what would happen next? Could the Ottomans recover from such a loss, or had they just lost their grip on the future of Europe? Number 7. The aftermath, a shifting balance of power. What happened after the battle? How did the victory at Lepanto impact Europe and the Ottoman Empire? The Battle of Lepanto was a resounding victory for the Holy League, but the aftermath was far from simple. While the Ottomans had suffered a catastrophic defeat, it wasn't the end of their empire. In fact, they would recover and remain a formidable force for many years to come. However, the victory at Lepanto did shift the balance of power in the Mediterranean. For the first time in centuries, the Ottoman Empire had been dealt a significant naval defeat, and their expansion into Europe was halted, at least for the time being. For Europe, the victory was celebrated as a triumph of Christianity over the forces of the East. The Holy League's success was seen as divine intervention, a sign that Europe's future was secure, at least for now. The battle united the Catholic powers and allowed them to reaffirm their dominance in the Mediterranean. However, the divisions between the European powers would eventually resurface, and the religious tensions that had fueled the wars would continue to simmer. Despite their defeat, the Ottomans did not give up their ambitions. They rebuilt their fleet and continued their naval operations, though they would never again achieve the same level of dominance in the Mediterranean as they had before the battle. But the Battle of Lepanto was not just a turning point for these two empires, it was a symbol of the changing tides of history. The world had shifted in ways that no one could have predicted, and the echoes of the battle would be felt for generations. Number 8. The impact on the Ottoman Empire, recovering from defeat. How did the Ottoman Empire recover after the crushing defeat at Lepanto? Was this the beginning of the end for their supremacy in the Mediterranean? Despite their monumental loss at Lepanto, the Ottoman Empire demonstrated remarkable resilience. The defeat was devastating, but it didn't spell the end of Ottoman power in the Mediterranean. The Ottomans quickly began to rebuild their fleet, though the psychological blow was harder to overcome. The loss forced the Ottomans to reconsider their naval strategy, but it also made them more cautious in their future confrontations with European powers. After Lepanto, the Ottomans turned inward, reassessing their priorities. The political structure of the empire had to be reinforced, and the military strategy recalibrated. While the Ottomans were no longer able to exert the same naval dominance they had once enjoyed, they were far from powerless. They shifted their focus to land-based expansion, building alliances with other powers, and strengthening their presence in the Middle East and North Africa. In the years that followed, the Ottomans continued to challenge European interests, but they no longer had the same overwhelming presence in the Mediterranean. While their fleet never fully recovered its former strength, the empire proved its capacity for survival, adapting to the changing geopolitical landscape. The Battle of Lepanto may have marked the peak of Ottoman naval power, but the empire would continue to remain a significant force for centuries. The defeat did, however, highlight the vulnerability of the Ottoman Empire. The victory of the Holy League demonstrated that even the greatest powers could be brought down, given the right circumstances. It was a moment of reckoning for the Ottomans, one that changed their relationship with the rest of Europe and set the stage for future conflicts. Number 9. The legacy of Lepanto, shaping the future of Europe. What lasting legacy did the Battle of Lepanto leave on Europe? Was it just a military victory, or did it influence European culture and identity? The Battle of Lepanto was much more than just a military victory. It became a defining moment in the shaping of European identity. The Holy League's triumph was not only a strategic and military success but also a deeply emotional one. For centuries, the Ottomans had been seen as an existential threat to Europe, and their defeat was celebrated as a victory for Christianity. The battle gave Europe a renewed sense of confidence and unity, as it demonstrated that the Ottoman Empire, once considered invincible, was not all-powerful. The victory at Lepanto became a rallying point for Catholic Europe, particularly for Spain, Italy, and the Papal States. The victory was seen as a sign of divine favor and was widely celebrated across Europe. It reinforced the idea of a united Christendom in the face of the Ottoman threat, even though this unity would later prove to be fragile. The battle also sparked a sense of European exceptionalism, an idea that the West had triumphed over the forces of the East, and it contributed to the formation of a shared European identity in the centuries that followed. However, the Battle of Lepanto also had more far-reaching cultural and social consequences. The victory was immortalized in art, literature, and religious iconography, serving as a symbol of Christian strength and unity. The image of the Christian fleet's victory over the Ottoman Empire became a powerful visual representation of Europe's self-image as the protector of Western civilization. But the legacy of Lepanto was not just one of triumph. The battle marked the beginning of the decline of the Mediterranean as the center of global power. While Europe was victorious, the Ottomans' defeat did not eliminate the threat they posed. They would continue to challenge European powers for centuries, even if their naval dominance was shattered. Ultimately, the legacy of Lepanto was a paradox. It was both a victory and a reminder of the dangers that Europe faced. While the battle shifted the balance of power in the Mediterranean, it also marked the beginning of a more complex geopolitical landscape, one where Europe's dominance would be tested by new and emerging global powers. Number 10. The end of the battle, a turning point in global history. Was the Battle of Lepanto truly a turning point in history, or just another chapter in the long struggle between East and West? How did the battle change the course of the world? In the grand scheme of history, the Battle of Lepanto stands as one of those rare moments when the tides of global power shifted, even if only for a brief moment. It was a turning point, not just for Europe and the Ottoman Empire, but for the world at large. The battle marked the beginning of the end for the Ottoman Empire's dominance over the Mediterranean, and it also signaled a shift in the balance of power between East and West. But the most significant impact of the battle was that it demonstrated the fragility of empires, even those that seemed invincible. The Ottomans, despite their losses, would continue to hold sway over vast swaths of land for centuries. However, their defeat at Lepanto foreshadowed their eventual decline, as they began to lose the confidence and military supremacy that had defined them for centuries. The battle also set the stage for Europe's rise in global influence, as the Holy League's victory was celebrated and built upon by the Catholic states. On a broader scale, the battle had consequences beyond the immediate context of the Mediterranean. The defeat of the Ottoman fleet shifted the power dynamics within Europe, encouraging new alliances and the growth of emerging naval powers. The competition for dominance in the Mediterranean shifted from the Ottomans to European powers like Spain, France, and England, all of whom would capitalize on the Ottoman Empire's weakened position in the region. For the rest of the world, the Battle of Lepanto was a clear demonstration of the changing tides of global power. It was a reflection of the ongoing clash between East and West, and while it didn't mark the end of that struggle, it was a pivotal moment in the larger narrative of the world's shifting political and cultural landscapes. The echoes of the battle would be felt for centuries, in the rise of new empires, the decline of old ones, and the eventual shift of global power toward the Western world.
Conclusion.
The Battle of Lepanto stands as one of history's defining moments, a clash of civilizations that reverberated far beyond the Ionian Sea. The Holy League's victory marked the end of the Ottoman Empire's naval dominance and slowed their expansion into Europe, but it also revealed the complexities of empires and their eventual decline. It was not just a military engagement, but a symbolic moment that highlighted the fragility of even the greatest powers. For Europe, the victory was a reaffirmation of Christian unity and a moment of pride that was immortalized in art, literature, and religious fervor. Yet, the long-term impact of the battle was more nuanced. While the Ottomans would never regain their previous naval power, they continued to be a force to be reckoned with for centuries. The legacy of Lepanto lies in its demonstration of how fragile the balance of power can be, and how a single battle can alter the course of history. As Europe celebrated, the Ottomans regrouped, proving that no empire is truly invincible. The echoes of Lepanto still reverberate in the Mediterranean and beyond, a reminder that the clash of civilizations is never truly over.